Cricket is all about high scores, centuries, and victories. Storytel now makes it super interesting for all the cricket fanatics out there. Join Amit Varma and Prem Panicker talk about the turning points in Indian cricket and their insights on those events.
December 13, 2014. The first test between Australia and India. Australia declared their second innings at the start of the fifth day. India have a target of 364 in 98 overs. Normally, India's never going to go for it. The focus is always going to be just play out the day somehow, take the draw, move on to the next match. But India have an interesting captain, a young man without the baggage and dogmas of the past, captaining in a test match for the first time, decides to go for the win. India play aggressively, and young Virat Kohli leads from the front with a sparkling 141. India lose a match by 48 runs, but a new era has begun. Welcome to Turning Points in Indian Cricket, and I'm Amit Varma.
Hi, and I'm Prem Panicker. Throughout this series, 9 episodes so far, we've talked about seminal moments in the history of Indian cricket and how it impacted on the future, which is pretty much the reason why the moments we picked were in fact picked. For once, we need to go away from turning points and look at a pivotal person. We've talked of influential captains, for instance, who, people like Saurav Ganguly and before him Ajit Wadekar, who, besides what they personally brought to the table in terms of skills and in terms of thinking, also got incredibly lucky in having the right pieces fall into place at the right time and thereby accomplishing some of the results that they did. Kohli strikes you as different in this, that he's not waiting for pieces to fall into place so much as going out and finding the pieces, fitting it into the picture that he wants, and effectively building the team he wants and getting it to play the way he wants in all three formats of the game, really. Would you say that that's the reason more than the individual brilliance or the surrounding tropes that make Kohli the perfect turning point pick for this concluding episode? Is it because of
I think there's really a new age of Indian cricket that has started with Kohli. And Kohli actually, causes great cognitive dissonance in me because when I watch a young talent for the first time, I'm seldom kind of wrong about how good he is. And, like when you watched a young Rohit Sharma, you were like, oh my God, this guy has so much time. He's definitely going to play Test cricket for India and so on and so forth. And I was completely wrong about Kohli. In the last episode, I patted myself on the back for being right about the IPL. I was wrong about Kohli. When I first saw him as an under-19 kid who had come onto the IPL and who was almost fast-tracked into the big league and even played for India earlier than I thought he should have. He looked like a fairly limited player in the sense that he had good shot square of the wicket, he had good hand-eye, footwork wasn't that great, technique didn't seem up to it. Kid had a lot of attitude, and normally in great players you expect a lot of humility. So I thought, okay, he's not really going to do very much, and I was completely wrong. And my being wrong takes me back to something I once read in a sportsman's interview, and I can't remember who it is, but the point that struck me was that his footwork and his stride against spinners, and you contrast the way he plays hook and pull shot with, say, someone like Rohit Sharma, who's a very good puller, and you watch them in slow motion, and Kohli just technically perfected every aspect of his game through the sheer dint of hard work, which brings me to sort of one of those great learnings for me, which took me many years to learn, that hard work is the greatest talent of all.
hard work is the greatest talent of all was the theme actually of a conversation that I heard while sitting in the audience when Abhinav Bindra's autobiography was being released, and in Bangalore that was Bindra and Dravid, and you can't think of two better people to talk about that, because both of them were highly disciplined people who worked on their craft meticulously. But it's also interesting that you brought up the work ethic before you brought up the skills, because the one anecdote about Kohli that stuck in my head all this time is the one that Saurav Ganguly is once shared on TV. He talked about how in a test match, Kohli batted for a good part of the day and scored about in excess of 150 or some such. And apparently, late that same night, one of Saurav's friends was staying in the same hotel, went to the hotel gym and saw Kohli working out. And it transpired that he was into the second hour of his workout. So when Kohli paused for breath, apparently this person approached Virat and asked him, you've just played a day of demanding test cricket. What the heck are you working out this hard for? And he said, I've been making hundreds and 150s and stuff like that, and I need to be able to go beyond into the 200s and beyond. And for that, I need that extra stamina, which is why I'm working out when I'm tired, because next time I know I will be able to think. Saurav said this in the last part of 2015. Virat Kohli between I think June of 2016 and now has scored all his 6 double hundreds in this one period. Until then, he was fluent enough through the 80s, 90s, hundreds. He would get into the mid 150s, and he pretty much petered out at that point. For me, it's somebody who can. Yeah, you're born with a certain amount of innate talent, and like you, my first glimpses of Kohli, I wasn't particularly impressed. Again, I thought he was very limited to maybe a very small handful of strokes, which he played irrespective of line and length, anyways, which is which speaks to a limited batting arsenal. And even in this relatively brief period of time, it is astonishing how he has worked on those shots and perfected them, how he has found shots for things that used to be weaknesses before, and how he's thought through every single aspect of his game. If I remember correctly, this is something that we spoke about in direct contrast as players, but Sunil Gavaskar. Not enough just to have talent, but also to have that application to work on every single aspect of the game, both the seen and the unseen aspects. Outside of that, if there is one standout quality to Kohli's play, let's keep his captaincy and related matters for later. What is that one quality that you would pick out?
In Kohli's play, I think the one quality that I would pick out for him, and it's a quality in his thinking, and it's probably too broad, but it's a quality in his thinking that permeates everything he does, whether as a player or as a captain, is the privileging of process over result. When I was a professional poker player for 5 years, and one of the things we learned very quickly is that in any given hand or any given session, chance plays a very big role. And the skill you only realize your edge over a long period of time. And therefore, don't be results oriented, be process oriented. Just make sure you can continue doing the right thing again and again and again, and the results will come. And you see this in a sense in everything that Kohli does. You see this, for example, in the captaincy decisions he makes, like we alluded to that Adelaide test at the start of this episode, where he chose to go for the chase, which and went for it, and we lost that game. But to me, it was a big victory, because it was completely worth it going for that chase as opposed to just trying to draw. And it was probably more likely, if you try to draw, that you'll end up losing, with that sort of defensive mindset and just letting the other team attack you. But it's there in all his batting. You see this in all his post-match interviews, that he doesn't really care about the result, whether he's lost or whatever, whether he's got out early, as long as he's getting the process right. And I think you see the same thinking in terms of building the team, that he wants to build the team, and it doesn't matter if he's convinced that the decision is correct. It may not pay off on a particular occasion, but he'll stick with it. And you see this in, say, the faith that he's had with Rohit Sharma in test matches, for example, where people kept saying, hey, no, he's a flat track bully in test matches, might be a very good one-day player, but don't play him. But he's stuck with Rohit Sharma, and the jury's still out on that. We'll see what happens. I mean, in my mind, the sample size is really too small to come to judgment yet. But if a guy like Kohli has made that judgment, fine. As a captain, he will rise and fall with the quality of the decisions he makes. So we'll find out if that works out. So it's that privileging of process over result, which is something that you see a lot in Indian cricket, and that the earlier point you made about how he was in the gym for 2 hours after making a big 100 on that particular day. And if you just look at the way he's worked on his fitness, and that's a classic example where when you're working on your fitness, a payoff is always long term, it's never short term. You think it is always process over result. So his immediate result is that you're tired, or that you have endorphins getting released or whatever, and you might feel good after a workout. But it's a lot of hard work. And Kohli, in fact, speaks about the diet that he went on, which sounds suspiciously like the keto diet I'm on from time to time. It's at the very least a very low carb diet. And he speaks of how he would wake up in the middle of the night wanting to chew his bed sheet because he was so incredibly hungry, and all he had was some chana and water besides a bed. But he told himself, man, if I get through this period, I can do this for the rest of my life. And the reward was far away. The reward was far off, and it wasn't guaranteed. But he stuck to the process once he had decided that this was the right way to go. And that is a value that you see sinking into the rest of the team, where they are also not so results oriented, which might sound odd because cricket fans are results oriented. If you lose a game, especially to Pakistan, they're going to stone your house. And if you play an aggressive shot and get out, they're going to castigate you. But had you shown the same approach and had the ball gone for six, they would have been like, wow, 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 he's counter attacking. So fans tend to be very results oriented. But with Kohli, he's finally gotten down to the modern sporting mindset that you just have to do the right thing. And which is also the ancient Indian philosophical mindset. That's what the Bhagavad Gita says, that don't think about the fruits of your action, just do the right thing. And in that sense, and maybe I hope I'm not giving uh, an opening for Hindutvawadis to co-opt Kohli. But jokes aside, this is something that I find incredibly refreshing, because I think not enough players have really imbibed this mindset enough in their careers.
God's honest truth, I never expected to hear Karmanya Vadikaraste being invoked in a cricket podcast, and that too in relation to Virat Kohli, whose
Especially by an atheist like me. But
that too, and in connection with a Virat Kohli whose language is the antithesis of classical Sanskrit philosophy. But that said, you made the point about his work ethic and his belief in processes and stuff like that, and we've had people talk this talk earlier. This seems to be one time when it's not just a case of Virat Kohli walking that talk, and you can. That's the other thing that you realize about a sport that lasts for as long as cricket does. A typical day's play is extremely demanding on you, both mentally and physically. Is that towards the third session you tend to tire. But initially Kohli and now the entire team seems as fresh in the third session as they were in the beginning. You also see reflections of this in the post-match interviews that some of these players do. I remember KL Rahul having made a century and then expressing disappointment. He said, I felt a bit tired towards a thing and I played a loose shot and I have to work on that. There is this instinctive, it's not just that they're repeating the captain's words. It's almost as if they've absorbed it, they've internalized it, and now it's there. Philosophy as well, and that is translating into the way they seem to be playing their cricket. The other thing that I again notice when I listen to Kohli's team members giving interviews post a day's play or whatever is, they seem to have a much clearer idea of what their individual role is and how it fits into the collective than their predecessors probably did. To cite one instance out of many, Akash Chopra has once reflected with a little bit of regret, with some wistfulness really, of the fact that when he went on that tour of Australia, he was opening with Sehwag, his first series really. He said that the team had a specific role for him. It was keep one end up and just keep rotating the strike, turn it over to Sehwag so Sehwag can attack. The last thing we need is for wickets to fall at the other end. You need to stay there. And Akash played that role brilliantly throughout that series. It was the first time I remember that we didn't lose wickets in the first session, in the first hour definitely, and then extended into the first session. They drove the Australian fielders nuts, because who expected a pair of Indian openers to take short singles in the very first over? Touch and run against McGrath and all that upset Australian calculations to a considerable degree. This point was that subsequently there was the Pakistan tour, and at the time that he was being dropped, there was the free-scoring Shikhar Dhawan as the successor or alternate, and his argument is that his role was never changed. Nobody ever told him that, okay, job done, Australia over and done with, different mindset now, go play the game that you are capable of playing. So he said he continued to play the way, in the belief that the team expected. And Listening to this struck me as, even a small company, every recruit is given a job definition, and there is a very uh, absolute clarity on what is expected of you, why it is expected, and how it contributes to the cause of the larger whole. This is the first time I'm hearing up to and including the 12th man and the person on the bench. For instance, players repeatedly, we've had this where a player had to sit out for injury or whatever, and somebody from the bench comes in and performs seamlessly. And they talk about how Kohli insists that even the bench players have to train as hard and be as prepared, because you never know when your chance is coming. And when it does come, you can't be a liability. You need to slot seamlessly into that position. I don't recall that kind of holistic captaincy thinking ever.
It never was. And just going back to Akash Chopra, for example, there was a series, I think it was Pakistan at home. I might be mistaken. I can't clearly remember. But Ganguly was captain, Wright was coach, and there was this sort of tussle between them where, Ganguly's own form was patchy. Yuvraj clearly merited a place in the test side by then. And because Ganguly was. Insecure about his own place in the side, rather than have Yuvraj in the middle order, he made Yuvraj open the batting. So what happened was there was a tussle between Ganguly and Wright, as I perceived it at the time, about who should open with Sehwag, and they alternated. So through the four tests, you had Akash and then Yuvraj, and Akash and then Yuvraj, and in the process, both of their confidence was destroyed. Both of their careers were sidetracked because Yuvraj should never have been opening in the first place, and with Akash, you just needed to give him the confidence that, hey, we'll back you for these four test matches. Here's your role. If you perform this role, pat on the back, you stay in the side. And you will never see that happening with Kohli's team. In fact, a classic example of how the team spirit within the team is the fact that you have three openers right now, and they keep replacing each other depending on injury or circumstance. And yet there is complete bonhomie and complete understanding that this is what the side requires. The whole squad is a squad. You see that same thing, for example, last year Karun Nair came in and made a triple century in a test match, and a guy makes a triple century in a test match. Wow. And he's dropped for the next game because the injured player he replaced comes back, because Kohli's loyal to his players, that this is a team I have, these are their roles, and you came in from the bench and made runs, and well done, and you're in the frame, and you will get more chances. But this is how I think about the game. And there is a danger, yes, that this can lead to a player being dogmatic, as I think Kohli has shown himself to be in his captaincy in, say, T20s or other formats. But I think on the whole, it's incredibly refreshing that here is a strong captain who is saying that, listen, the buck stops with me. I will, take the can, and I will stand by my players. And if I want you in the team, you're in the team. And if I don't want you, you're not. But I will stand by you, and I'll give you this is your role. You just perform, and I'm okay with that.
Interesting point, because when you talk about standing by the team, by the players, and all that, a perennial grouse of mine, particularly after I started covering cricket as opposed to just following cricket, is that you end up in these press conferences, and there are major issues either directly related to the game or on the periphery, like the match fixing or whatever, and the captain of the day comes into the press conference, and that famous line about press conferences, right? They pretend to talk and we pretend to listen, which is pretty much all that used to happen. You kept wishing, in fact, at least on one occasion, I have, at the end of a Sachin Tendulkar press conference, for instance, I've gone back, and instead of writing about what was said at the press conference, I said, I wrote up what should have been said. I wrote it up as if it had been said, and at the end, I said, this is the press conference that Sachin could have given had he had the ability and the courage to stand up for the game. I was reminded of that recently when Kohli very vocally said, "Look, this kind of scheduling is stupid. A team needs to be able," and he's not talking about rest, which is normally what players talk about, and we promptly say, "Oh, you know what? They want that Ash or Aram sort of thing." He said, "It is a tough tour. We need the time to prepare for it. We need the time to work on our injuries and to get back to full fitness and to actually acclimatize and stuff like that. And you guys can't just have us flying in one day and playing cricket the other day." This is not the first time this kind of scheduling is happening. In fact, we've literally done that. We've flown in to South Africa one day, and on the third day after that, we've started the first test. And there was not a yip from anybody. Uh, Today, Kohli is standing there and saying, and he's not saying it on his own behalf. He's saying the team needs this time. The team needs you guys to think about this, and which again makes you, kind of Yeah, it's not a turning point. It's a pivotal person, and you were right in pointing to that one small danger, because Kohli, the only other person I can think of who got his way whenever, in whatever fashion he wanted. For instance, take the example of the coach issue, Anil Kumble and Ravi Shastri taking charge again. The only other person who could have done that and who has gotten away with getting his own way, for instance, is Saurav Ganguly. But Saurav did that because he had a godfather. The BCCI president Jagmohan Dalmia listened to Saurav and did what Saurav wanted, within reason at least. Kohli doesn't have a godfather. He doesn't have.
I think that speaks to the stature of the game, that he's lifted himself to this level where he can unquestionably get what he wants. Which is, in his case, even if we say it's a good thing, the thing to ask is that is it otherwise generally a bad thing that one man can be so powerful? I mean, to a certain extent, Dhoni was as powerful a captain in many ways, and Dhoni also had his dogmas over selection. And there was a period of time where, like for example, I think Suresh Raina played many more tests than he should have. And that tour of Australia where I mentioned, where Kohli captain for the first time, there was a young leg spinner in the side who really should not have been there, who didn't have the first class record. And both of these guys, that particular spinner and Suresh Raina, are clients of the public relations firm, which Dhoni set up under a proxy of his friend, which is a clear and shocking conflict of interest. And it's something you overlook because, hey, the man's a superstar. And Kohli's not doing anything like that. And, he's actually conducting himself really well and doing a great job as a captain. But that's a larger, and it's really a separate question of whether that cult of celebrity and of one person becoming so powerful that they overwhelm the whole system should be allowed to happen. But again, that's a digression.
Would you say that this question of one person being powerful enough to get his own way as far as the game is concerned, um, its pluses, minuses? On the plus side, you definitely have to say that if that one person happens to think so strongly about what the game requires for its betterment and what players require for their betterment and stuff like that, then on balance, yeah, it's better than somebody who doesn't care or who just goes through the motions. But I also wanted to, it's two things are coming together in this whole Kohli puzzle. One is the fact that he's got, thanks to the IPL, and pretty much every single player today is a product of the IPL, barring just one or two examples like a Nishant, for instance, or MS himself, predates that period. You brought up this question of his dogma in his captaincy at times. Three forms. Right now he's leading in all three. My question is, does that work? Is Kohli as good a T20 captain, for instance, as he is a test captain? I love him in test cricket. I like the attitude he brings to thing. I like his desire and his constant, you call it impatience, but by whatever name, his desire to keep the game moving. Because just because you say it's a 5-day game, it doesn't mean that the game needs static periods for a considerable period of time. But is he equally a good ODI captain?
Well, what I keep saying about him is I think he's a great test captain, a mediocre ODI captain, and a terrible T20 captain. A great test captain for the reasons you pointed out, and he shows an aggression like in that Adelaide chase when they decided to chase down more than 300 on the last day. Which is just a great decision, and he backs it up by going out and leading from the front and performing himself. And like you said, he keeps things moving, and I think he's a very, very good test captain. I mean, if I had an all-time Indian cricket 11, I'd be tempted to just make Kohli the captain ahead of Gavaskar and whoever else. But I think his issues with T20, and this is something that at some point will get resolved for sure, because he's too intelligent to not adapt to it, and maybe it's a mistake I'm making in my reading. But like we discussed in the last episode, that in T20s, the cost of a dot ball is much higher and the value of a wicket is much lower. So you have to take more risks and be much more aggressive. And I think that Kohli, in the way that the batting side that he is leading sets up either chases or their first innings, is too conservative. And, one thing I often say is that the most important metric for a batsman in a T20 game is the strike rate of the power score minus the strike rate of whichever batsman you are evaluating. And if that is a positive number, that is, if the batsman has batted slower than the power score, then they are a liability to exactly that extent. And it doesn't matter what stage of the innings they bat, because to me, you just have to keep attacking at all times, barring exceptional circumstances. And by that measure, if some of Kohli's innings, which otherwise by conventional standards you'll see a strike rate of 130 or 140, and you'll say, wow, that's great. Uh, don't really measure up. Even the season, a couple of seasons ago, where he was just phenomenal. I mean, it's Bradman-esque. I think he literally made 974 runs in that season. But you look at his strike rates and contrast it to the power strike rates, not that good. And time and again, when Bangalore, Kohli's team was batting, he would make a certain score, he would lose the game, and then he would say that, look, they batted well. I thought we got the power score. While in my estimation, and statistically, this is borne out, they were consistently 20 or 30 runs below. Now, this is slightly complicated by the fact that he's the best batsman in the world. And you look at him in T20s and the way he bats and the kind of scores, and he himself is just an astonishingly good batsman. But I think he makes this tactical error as a captain sometimes. Even in the last T20 World Cup, we didn't front load. West Indies and England did front load and attack from the get go. But this is something that I think if I am right, then this is something that he will at some point be smart enough to figure out. But one of the things that's happening here is that India has also, and Kohli has therefore, stuck with players in the shorter formats who have no business being there. Like, I think Ajinkya Rahane is just a great test batsman. Great test batsman. I'm a huge fan. He's sort of iffy in ODI cricket. I'm not so sure. In T20s, he's a downright liability. He should not even be in the squad. And I think Kohli needs to open out a little bit more and look outside of his franchise as well, and look at batsmen around the IPL. And honestly, we have enough talent. Like, why a guy like Rishabh Pant hasn't played a little bit more for India, and Shreyas Iyer should really also get a lot more chances. I don't understand, because to me they are modern day batsmen. Like, I think there's a certain class of modern batsmen which has come into the game with following on Kohli's footsteps. And I look at guys like KL Rahul and Shreyas Iyer, and they totally fall, and Karun Nair, and they totally fall into that category where they're technically very good, very sound, but at the same time they're very aggressive in their intent. They go for their strokes. They will not let a game meander. Uh, and and someone like Cheteshwar Pujara, who also I'm a very big fan of, is sort of the antithesis of that. He almost feels like he's playing cricket. He's from an earlier age. He's kind of been transplanted into this one, which is one of those really poignant sort of tragedies. Because honestly, if you look at it philosophically, given the awesome aggressiveness of India in Test matches, you just wonder that does he really belong? That the next time he leaves the team because of failure, will there ever be a way back for him? But those are separate questions. But to answer your captaincy question, and this is a very subjective call, and this could easily change, because I think Kohli's, if he's a great Test captain now, he's going to remain one. He's only going to learn more and get better. And as far as T20s are concerned, if he is indeed making these kind of mistakes, he will catch up on it. And another really smart guy in the Indian team, R Ashwin, has pretty much caught on to it. He gets it. There are other people within this team who get it. I think Rohit Sharma, if you look at the way Mumbai Indians have approached their last couple of IPL seasons, to a certain extent, they figure it out as well. So I think we will see in the years to come how it goes.
We've at this point in time, and at unlike things that have been locked into history, and therefore you can, with the perspective of time and distance, actually evaluate how it's impacted on the game. The problem with doing a Kohli episode is he is a work in progress. His team is a work in progress. You have no idea how this is going to resonate. For instance, one of the recurring themes in all of this is that you've had transformational people coming in, and for that period of time, they've caused an enormous impact on the game. They've from a Naidu taking Indian cricket to the attention of the world, to a sort of Ganguly creating a combative unit and all of that. Unlike those, we still can't, quite figure out where this is going. Because for all you know, he might turn out to be another one of those figures who, during his period, like a Patawadi, for instance, during his period, has an enormous influence. But beyond that, Indian cricket just goes back to cricket, and cricketers go back to their ways. an ideal legacy for Kohli, besides all that mountain of runs that he's busy accumulating and his leadership of the side, would be if he can ingrain these same attitudes into the next lot. But it's interesting that we're doing this podcast at this point in time because we've had one fantastic home season last year. Um, it's been followed up this year, but we continue to play pretty much at home, and we're on the cusp of probably the next stage of evaluating Kohli, both as a player and as a leader of men, because two tough assignments back to back.
South
You have
Africa and England, I should tell the listeners that we're recording this in December 2017, and we are headed to South Africa next month and to England in the summer after that. What I would again, there are two aspects of Kohli's influence to cover. Certainly, he's a role model, and I think a fantastic role model in terms of the work ethic and what he's brought to the game. But he's also a role model for the way he behaves. And the younger Kohli was abrasive, used cuss words on the field and so on. And, and you don't want that to be to overwhelm for the casual fan of the game, to overwhelm the aspects of him which are really worth following. But in that sense, I think just in terms of work ethic, fitness, the way people approach the game, he's already left a mark on the game. You see that in all the younger players. He's already left a mark on the game. And what I also think is, when I say that, look, I think he's the greatest Indian batsman in terms of skill and the runs will follow, I really mean the runs and the records will follow. Because one of the things about Kohli is that he is incredibly fit. I can't remember any batsman in the world who's been as fit as he is at this point in time. And therefore, I think his longevity, if he can keep himself motivated, will also be extremely good. I see all the records stumbling. No, and I think as a record stumble, they will matter less to him than they did to the person whose record he is breaking when he made them, because he is just more focused on the whole team thing. But it is nice to rack up the hundreds and the 200s, and that anecdote you mentioned about him working out for 2 hours in the gym after making 150 because hey, I was tired, I should have made 200, is just a fantastic anecdote and an inspiration, hopefully, for all young people. And on that hopeful note, we are ending this series of turning points in Indian cricket. Maybe 10 years later, we can, add 1 or 2 points more. But for the moment, this is it. Thank you for listening to us, and do tune into other shows on Storytel.
Meanwhile, do check out our relationship podcast, It's Complicated, written and hosted by Sean De Silva. Sean talks about the mechanics of relationships today and how they impact us on a larger scale. Thank you for listening.